Susan Foreman was introduced during the inception of Doctor Who. She was introduced as the Doctor's granddaughter in the original Doctor Who story titled Untitled Child, where Susan was a 15-year-old girl at Coal School, and her two school teachers, Ian Chesterton and Barbara Wright, suspected her. They were impressed by her knowledge and her intellect, but she had an uncertain grasp of the 1960s time period, and seemed to treat certain aspects of the teaching of the school like a form of child's play that she seemed to tolerate. One day, Ian and Barbara followed Susan home to find a junkyard, to find a blue mysterious police box, to find a mysterious old man, to find out the police box was in fact a spaceship and a time machine that was bigger on the inside than the outside, and could travel anywhere in time and space. It turns out Susan wasn't from Earth. She and her grandfather, known as the Doctor, were from another time, another world. Wanderers in space and time, cut off from their own planet and their own people. And this set up a storyline of the Doctor, Susan, Ian and Barbara lost in space and time as the Doctor tried to return Ian and Barbara home, and kept continually failing. Susan left the TARDIS towards the beginning of the second season in the Dalek invasion of Earth, where she fell in love with a man named David Campbell, and decided to settle down and get married in the 22nd century, as the Doctor was forced to let her go, but he promised that one day he would return. But except for an appearance in the 20th anniversary special The Five Doctors, alongside many other different companions, doctors and villains, we haven't seen Susan since on television, which may seem strange given the fact that she was a central part of the beginning years of Doctor Who. The fact that she is the only member of the Doctor's family in his early years on Gallifrey that we have so far met, and the fact that the original actor who played her, Carol Ann Ford, is still alive. But today I want to take a look at the character of Susan and her time on the show in the William Hartnell era, later on Big Finish, and why so far she hasn't come back, and how I think she could be integrated into the future of the show. I think the biggest thing to consider when considering Susan's character and her time on the show is the point she was a part of in the show's history. Doctor Who practically reinvents itself with every regeneration. It's worth considering when you sit back and look at the series as a whole. It's very much several different TV series interlinked by having the same concept, which is the biggest thing to consider when bringing an old character back. How would this old character fit into the series of today? Susan was a part of Doctor Who when it was still establishing itself. We didn't know who the Doctor was or where he came from, and therefore it wasn't especially significant for him to have a granddaughter travelling with him in the TARDIS. And it's only now that Susan comes across as such an anomaly in Doctor Who, considering that we haven't met any other members of the Doctor's family from Gallifrey. There is a clear, deep connection and caring relationship between the Doctor and Susan. The Doctor can be rather reckless and withdrawn and detached, and often struggles to show his more loving side. But he clearly cares a lot for Susan and is very protective of her, very overprotective and nurturing, as he considers her his responsibility and won't hesitate to scold and discipline her when necessary. Susan herself is played by Carol Ann Ford and very much acts as the child of the group. Unfortunately, I think the execution never quite lives up to the potential of the character, as she's unfortunately frequently underused and falls into the generic damsel in distress role a lot of the time. Fortunately though, what does elevate Susan for me is not only her relationship with the Doctor, as already discussed, as Susan is also very caring for the Doctor as her elderly grandfather, and she very much looks after him, but she also has a close bond and relationship with Ian and Barbara as the close parent figures in her life, who show the needed warmth and compassion that the Doctor often lacks. I also think Carol Ann Ford brings a lot of likeable character qualities to the role. She brings an authentic, childlike enthusiasm and love of the universe, an enthusiasm for travelling that the Doctor also shares. She also has a keen sense of kindness and compassion, particularly towards the Thals in the Daleks, and a very firm and stubborn sense of morals and principles shown in the Aztecs, very much opposing the horrid nature and the horrid values and morals of the Aztecs, and refusing to be married off to an Aztec man who was about to be sacrificed, showing her as an independent thinker. I think Susan, as a childlike figure, can be very naive and overly optimistic, thinking overly positively, and although she's often seen to have a lot of vulnerability, she does have a deep sense of bravery and intelligence. She is brave, loyal and principled, determined to help the Thals in the Daleks, and determined to venture into the forest to find the drugs to save her friends' lives, and very much dedicated to it despite her fear. I think, unfortunately, what does let Susan down is that in a lot of the stories, she becomes rather underused and known as the damsel in distress figure, and becomes rather useless and helpless, very much relying upon the Doctor, Ian and Barbara to be rescued and help her out of the situation. And considering her intelligence, you would think she would be more self-sufficient. I think stories like The Keys of Mariners, The Reign of Terror, and Planet of Giants are key examples of this. And although Susan is a very likeable character, her potential is very underutilised. Susan was originally meant to be a much more strange and mysterious character, who was meant to be incredibly intelligent with acrobatic abilities and telepathic abilities. That's the role that was originally pitched to Carol Ann Ford, but the role was changed to make her more of a relatable teenager. But I think pursuing more alien sides to her character may have made her more interesting. Susan shows her best potential in the sense rights, where her telepathic abilities are utilised, where we see her helping the sense rights and communicating with them, and being of good service to the plot. It also shows more conflict between the Doctor and Susan, with Susan being more rebellious against the Doctor's parenting. It shows a sign of growth from Susan, and Susan's exit by the end of the series feels very earned, partly due to the seeds being planted in the Sensorites, where Susan expresses her frustration at never belonging to one time or place, and just drifting from time to time. But although that side of her was utilised in the Sensorites, and I think An Unearthly Child alludes to the more alien side of Susan, it's never used to its full potential, which is a part of Carol Ann Ford's frustration in the fact that she was misused. So she left in the Dalek invasion of Earth, where she finally grew up, as she fell in love with a man named David Campbell and stayed behind in the 22nd century. It was emotionally fitting ending that felt right for Susan's character, and it was satisfyingly built up over the story. I just wish the series had shown more of Susan's growth of maturity, which was alluded to in the Sensorites, but the arc was never properly developed. I think part of the reason Susan's character has never returned is because she's much remembered in her damsel in distress role of the 60s era, and the original intentions of the character never really came to anything. Susan stayed as a missed opportunity and an underdeveloped character until Big Finish got hold of her. She did briefly return in The Five Doctors in 1983, but she was again delegated to a damsel in distress role that was typical for a companion of the time. Susan has played much more of an active role in Big Finish, and her character has been better fleshed out and developed. I think the younger version of Susan is better developed and characterised, showing more of her intelligence. I think TikTok World is a highlight for her character, as it allows the character to be self-sufficient, and the Doctor shows a lot of growth as he sees how capable she is. But it's the older version of Susan where the character has been truly explored and fleshed out, with Carol Ann Ford returning to the role alongside Paul McGann as the 8th Doctor, first in An Earthly Child in 2009. It's in this story where we explore the aftermath of the Dalek invasion of Earth, with humanity doing their best to rebuild their race, with a mistrust of other alien races. And Susan is great, having become a principled and hopeful political figure. The character still has naive optimism and hopeful nature, but now has more strength and experience, also having a son called Alex, who is played by Paul McGann's son, Jake McGann. Susan becomes an active part of the story with the Doctor and Lucy Miller, played by Sheridan Smith. I think relative dimensions is a highlight of that storyline. I mean, on the surface, it involves a big fish on the TARDIS during Christmas dinner, but setting the main story centrally and entirely upon the TARDIS really gives the story a chance to delve into the dynamics and character relationships between the Doctor, Susan and Alex. The story shows Susan's pain and the consequences of the Doctor's actions, of leaving her behind. It shows Susan's strength in her dedication and commitment to her family, her overly protective nature over Alex, showing how much she has changed and how much the Doctor and Susan have grown apart as people, with the Doctor not fitting into family dynamics and relationships. It represents and highlights the Doctor's shortcomings. He has key principles of kindness, but due to his detached and alien nature, can be very unknowingly insensitive and manipulative and deceiving, linking back the actions of the Hartnell Doctor. It's a story that properly explores that dynamic and relationship. We see Susan and the Doctor go through true turmoil and heartbreak and tragedy during the conclusion to the Lucy Miller storyline, as it all culminates with another Dalek invasion with Lucy Miller and To the Death, which not only brings a great sacrifice from Lucy Miller, but Susan also manages to lose her son Alex, which is very impactful upon Susan. Just last year we saw Susan get her own Big Finish spin-off called Susan's War, focused on Susan in the Time War, where she shows her commitment and responsibility in stopping the Daleks after they killed her son. We see her meet up with an older in Chesterton in another adventure with the Sensorites, as well as highlighting her naive but optimistic and principled nature, showing a lot of conflict in the corruption of the nature of the Time Lords, having been away from them for some time. The 8th Doctor turns up again in the last episode, and it manages to further highlight the differences between the Doctor and Susan, in that the Doctor keeps running away from responsibility in fear, as Susan faces up to it, and shows the two having been drawn apart from each other in many ways. Susan has grown up and matured, and in many ways the Doctor has never grown up. Big Finish has managed to explore Susan in many ways which she was never explored in her time on TV. It means if Susan were to be brought back to the TV series, there would be many opportunities to explore her character in similar ways. So why hasn't she come back? Well, I think it largely comes down to what the show is now compared to what it was when Susan was a central character in Doctor Who, as the series is now a lot more developed. The Doctor is now a Time Lord from the planet Gallifrey, a character who can regenerate, a character who survived the Time War. There's a lot more that we now know about the character. The series has done its best to keep the Doctor a mystery, but it's been difficult over the years, and it's led to the Doctor becoming less mysterious over time. And many creators have tried to develop and add in new lore to try and restore the mystery in the character, like the Countdown Master Plan, the Time War, the Hybrid, and the Timeless Child. Some have worked, and some haven't. But the Doctor's family life has been steered away from. I can only think that in the minds of the writers, that exploring that potential with Susan could run the risk of revealing too much about the Doctor's family and origins, and could also run the risk of exploring and introducing more of the Doctor's life and family somewhere down the line, which would diminish the mystery of the character. Whilst I can see the concern of those issues, I think there are ways to avoid them. I think the advantages of bringing Susan back far outweigh the disadvantages when you consider the family dynamics that have been explored on Big Finish. You could easily just primarily focus on the relationship between the Doctor and Susan. Show how they have grown apart, the consequences of the Doctor's actions, the principled and moral nature of Susan as a character, how she has been impacted and influenced by the Doctor to carry on and continue their values, morals and principles. Show how the Doctor has made Susan a better person in her fight for justice. You could take similar ideas from Big Finish and borrow them and build upon them in the same way The Haunting of Villa Diodati did in Series 12. There have been moments across Doctor Who which would have been an obvious chance to bring Susan back, but she didn't come back. During the 50th anniversary, there was a lot of speculation about Susan's return, and it would have made sense to bring her back. Maybe alongside Ian Chesterton, played by William Russell, bringing the original companions from 1963 back would have made a lot of sense. What we got was Day of the Doctor, which was a fantastic story, very fitting for a 50th anniversary celebration, centred around the Doctor, and managing to tell a story that explored the 16-year hiatus in a storyline that highlighted the Doctor's values in a meaningful way. So I'm certainly not complaining about what we got because it was great, but it certainly would have been an obvious opportunity to bring Susan back. Upon thinking about Susan and the possibility of her returning, I did think how it would have solved pretty much all the problems of the Timeless Child plotline if the Timeless Child had been Susan. I know she was a theory originally along with Jenny and Captain Jack and maybe others, but now we know what the Timeless Child is. I can't help think how Susan fits perfectly into that idea. I like the basic idea of the Timeless Child, of the Time Lords, experimenting upon a child to steal the power of regeneration for themselves, to build upon the immorality of the Time Lords, and it reflects a lot of our history with male oppression and the values of British imperialism. I just hate that it's the Doctor. It gives her too much importance. She is now the centrepiece of Time Lord society, and her importance is now defined by the Timeless Child, which diminishes what has previously made the character so appealing and important. I also don't like the idea of the Timeless Child being the Master, as that would diminish the Doctor and the Master as equals. But if it had been Susan, then that would have been perfect. Susan always had a mystique about her. We never really knew who she was, why she was with the Doctor, and why the Doctor never took any of his other family when he first left Gallifrey. Why she had such strong telepathic abilities. Susan said on numerous occasions that she never felt like she belonged anywhere, so I reckon the Doctor took her on his travels in the TARDIS at a very early age, and very much brought her up upon the TARDIS for a long time. The Doctor's actions after leaving Gallifrey are also very suspicious and mysterious, taking the hand of Omega with him, as seen in Remembrance of the Daleks. It would be interesting if Susan wasn't the Doctor's granddaughter by blood, but he raised her as a parent figure, so Susan valued the Doctor as her grandfather. It would have been interesting to reveal that the Doctor discovered Susan as the timeless child before he left Gallifrey, discovered the immoral actions of the Time Lords and how they'd manipulated and controlled Susan, and decided to save her and take her with him. It would reveal a lot of the mystery around Susan, but still keep a lot of mystery surrounding the Doctor in the dark. Maybe the Doctor had kept the identity and truth behind Susan a secret from her, as she would have been reverted back to a child with her memory wiped by the Time Lords, and maybe the Doctor kept the truth from her when they ran away, which would have led to some interesting conflict and lack of trust between the Doctor and Susan, maybe causing a rift between them in their personal relationship. But as much as it would have improved the Timeless Child plotline, I don't think it should now be undone. Chris Chibnall has made the Timeless Child the Doctor, and he is free to do whatever he wants to do with the idea. But how could Susan return in the future? Well, there are a few options. I reckon if Susan is alive, then the Doctor believes she died in the Time War. During the 9th and 10th Doctor era, the Doctor was pretty certain all his people were wiped out. And whilst they were eventually brought back, I think it makes sense for the Doctor to have lost Susan in the Time War. But even if Big Finish is put aside, it makes sense that Susan fought in the Time War and came back to Gallifrey. It makes sense the Doctor believes she was defeated in some way. So maybe her TARDIS fell backwards through time or slipped sideways into a pocket universe. I don't know, but somehow she accidentally escaped her inevitable death. So at some point during this storyline, the Doctor could discover that her granddaughter she thought was dead is in fact alive. So how'd this go? Well, once again, there are a number of different options and opportunities that they could go with. Maybe we could see Susan having to build a new life for herself on a different planet, at a different part of history. Maybe she is continuing the Doctor's values and continuing to help those in struggle and need. We see a peaceful environment where she's doing good work and being of good service, and in a place of happiness, away from the Time Lords, and having escaped from her past life. Maybe seeing the Doctor is a dark reminder of that past, and she's rather distant towards her, wanting to distance herself from the Doctor. Maybe she feels a sense of responsibility towards the life she has built, and she doesn't want the Doctor ruining it. She knows the Doctor causes a great deal of trouble and harm, and doesn't want her to ruin what she has. I think she'll be happy to see her, and happy she's alive, but fearful for her own safety. That's a storyline that has a lot of potential and tragedy, where the Doctor is overjoyed that her granddaughter is alive and looking forward to reconnecting with her, only to find that she's moved on from her, is perfectly self-sufficient without her, and trying to distance herself from her. The Doctor is a lonely character, and this would only add to that loneliness. Maybe Susan is proved right, and the Doctor and Susan has to defend the planet from an alien invasion due to the Doctor's presence. It would be a tragic ending to see the Doctor realise the death her presence caused, and realise Susan is better off without her. But what I really enjoyed about the Big Finish audios with Susan is how integral and important she became to the overall story. It was great to see her involved with the Meddling Monk and the Daleks. I think Susan could be equally involved in a finale-like storyline in the main series. We could have an arc where Susan has been kidnapped by the Daleks or the Master, and the Doctor is trying to track her down and rescue her over the course of the series, only for it to come to a head in the finale. I'd love to see Susan with a modern version of the Master, as they could very much have a history to play upon on Gallifrey, and seeing Susan facing the Daleks would definitely bring a lot of history and tragedy. Maybe seeing the Daleks kidnap Susan to try and extract information about the Doctor to use against her. I think the story could equally explore the conflicting relationship between the Doctor and Susan, with Susan confronting the Doctor, not only for leaving her on Earth with no sign of coming back, but taking her away from her home as she was lost in time with no individuality or real identity, and explore the Doctor's regret. Obviously, you would want to avoid revealing too much about the past, but I think adding some level of mystery that there was some reason why the Doctor took Susan with her would be interesting. Maybe the Doctor vaguely implying that Susan was under threat and the Doctor wanted to save her, but leaving it ambiguous to any of the reasons why the Doctor took Susan with her, being unwilling to share any information, would genuinely add to the mystery of the Doctor and Susan without revealing any key details. I think it would have to be a vague implication and hint, much like the vague details about the Doctor's home and identity in the 1960s era of the series. Honestly, at this point, I think it's unlikely Susan will ever return, because there have been too many opportunities to bring her back that haven't been taken. I think if she is going to come back, it will most likely be in the 60th anniversary in 2023. But if Susan Foreman ever does return, there are plenty of directions to take the character. I just hope, if Susan returns, they do her justice.